All right, hello Facebook. So today we're going to go through the Starboard Sprint. Obviously my favourite board, the board that I race on in nearly every race, and the board that's probably won more races in the world than any board in recent times. So Starboard asked me to do this, and I think it's pretty relevant coming from me. So we'll start running through the board, and then I'll try and answer all the questions that have come through on the Facebook. So board's behind me, so we'll go check it out. Also, thanks to Sam McCulloch for loaning me his board. Had to drive about an hour and a half this morning to go get it. I don't have one in the country at the moment, but I have a few overseas where I do most of my racing. So the board is behind me. Yeah, she's a beauty. We'll go check her out. Not sure how to swing this around. There we go. So this is the 2020 Starboard Sprint. And she's the best board that I've ever paddled. Basically what we did was, like we do every year with, I'll swing it back around. What we do with every year is try and make the board at least a length or two lengths faster than the previous year's board. So we do that with every range. So I think the range this year is the 21.5, 21.5 was the 2019. The 2020 is 20.75, 22 and 24. And each of those boards go through rigorous testing. So we don't just have like a standard board size that ends up getting blown up or changed. Like we actually test all the boards. So it takes months and months and months. All the guys at the shop, like Daniel Hasulio, Trevor, Ollie, Connor, myself, all head over to Starboard HQ there and do a hell of a lot of testing. So it's definitely not just an easy process like everyone thinks. Like we don't just think of an idea and go, oh, that's great, we'll just go with that for this season. It's just going to be that's the best board to do. It actually takes a long time to go through it all. And when we put those boards on the line, we put those boards in productions, we're really proud of it. And I think that comes from all the way down from Sven through the marketing team. So it's super important to have these really good boards for me, and I'm lucky to be able to paddle on the Starboards. So let's go back to what I was doing before. So first thing you notice, the branding's slightly bigger now on the Starboard, so you can actually see the logo on the water, where you probably don't notice that. We'll start with the nose, and then we'll just work our way along, and I'll make it up as I go. But what you'll notice with the nose is it's got like this little, turn in it, which allows the water to sort of run off and along the board and then coming off the other side. Like it doesn't just plow into the water. So if you actually put an extra bit here, it'll actually stick a lot more, and it'll make it a little bit, basically when you're trying to catch runs or stick on someone's wash, you know how you get stuck and your left leg goes down, your right leg goes down. This is what this prevents. And then this shape here, and if you'll notice it from the front angle, you see like that sharp sort of, triangle sort of shape. So from here down. So what you'll find is the water actually come through this piercing point here. So the nose is quite pierced, so you can actually cut the water first. And then the water will actually run up through here and then run off the sides. Especially when you're you're hitting wake, you're hitting chop, and you don't want that water to be stuck on your deck. That's going to really help you. What we've done too is we've raised this slightly through the center here. And why we've done that is by narrowing the board to 20.75, we've actually taken a little bit of volume out of the sides and the rails. So we've actually lifted these sides here to be a little bit higher. So my hand's small, but that's about how big it is. And we've made the rails slightly flatter. So what you can see them in the rear vision in that mirror over there. See how flat those rails are? That really helps you in the chop, and doesn't allow the water to stick on this side of the board as much. So it's actually allowing you to move through that water cleanly and smoothly. Leash point up here. So I guess you'll see me in basically all my races. I'll actually put my leash up the front here. So it'll be on my left leg, because that's the one that goes in front. And that's where I'll be putting my leash most of the time. For the standing area, it's a lot flatter now. So we've actually flattened this out, made it a little bit more even. And we've also cut these edges out. So even though we've gone narrower, we've kept it like quite stable. So when you're actually paddling, you're not going to feel like this board is any more unstable than the 2019 21.5, which is pretty cool, because if you've got a narrower board, you're always going to find that you feel like you're more unstable, you're going to fall off more, but you're not on this board. This board is the best board I've used by far. We've also, on this section of the board, instead of having that sort of aggressive hump that sort of has come up in previous years, we've really flattened it out all the way through to this standing area. So for when you're turning, we've actually flattened this section out as well and given it like sort of a reverse. You can see how it reverses down through here. And by reversing this down, it actually allows us to get more, weight on the back of the foot when we're turning or when we're downwinding or whenever we're using this board in like a bit more messy conditions where we've got to step back or we've got to get back on our board quickly. We get to lock our foot in a little bit more here, and our left foot is not so low, which is pretty cool, or your right foot, depending on if you're goofy or natural. And you see how it comes down here. So we've kept the water line running all the way back through here. But when you are looking at the board from this angle, you can actually see how the top of the deck actually runs down. So by doing this, we actually reduce the volume at the back of the board, which allows us to turn better. And you'll also see that little sort of chop out through here. So when the board sinks, you're not going to have so much board in the water, but you've still got these high rails, which allows the water to move through and doesn't allow that water to get on the deck. And you also, obviously we know that we've got lots of handle points on the board. So you got a point for, well, a lot of people like to use that one. I actually like to use this right-hand side one. Put the board on my hip to run in, and then obviously some guys like to put one handle here, one handle there, or have them a bit skewed. So it's all about a bit of a personal preference. With the drainage holes, they're a bit tucked in and out of the way now because they're actually right up in the rail, and they're slightly angled to sort of allow that water flow to rush off the board. I think that's all the top, so let's flip it over. Good to see a few people watching. If you have any questions while I'm talking, probably the best time to ask me now, and then I'll get to them once I get through the board. But yeah, I'll get on to the bottom of the board now. So we've gone really quite sharp at the front here. Sort of runs sharp through here. You sort of get quite a lot of width sort of through the middle of the board, but this sort of section at the front here is quite pointy, which allows it to cut through that water really quickly and allows you to maintain that really efficient, effective pace throughout your paddle. You probably can see it from here. On the sprints, we've run a concave through the center of the board for a long time, and you've sort of got these side planes that are basically starting from about here now. We don't run the concave too far forward. Otherwise the board can get stuck in the water, whereas like if we hit this bit flat at the front, it allows the board to move side to side. So you've got quite a deep sort of running concave all the way to about the fin box. And this allows you to sort of like when you're getting up to that speed, when you're catching runs, when you're sort of sitting on wash, it's going to allow that board to be only sitting on these two side panels. And when we're sitting on those two side panels, we're actually allowing the water to flush through the center of the board and then run out through the tail. You'll notice this year we've actually gone a lot flatter on the tail, whereas in previous years you might have seen the concave sort of come all the way to the back, whereas now it's pretty flat. So when we get to this point, the board is actually rushing out off the board, same as off the rails, and you're not going to have as much instability when you're on that turn. And we found that it didn't actually change anything speed-wise, so I think it was a really good design. So, whoa, turn it around. So yeah, that's pretty much my rundown of the board. I'm going to go over here. I've got my laptop set up, and I've got a couple of questions, so I'm going to go through those. I'm going to try and get the board in the background so it looks like a good shot, you know. What to do. No, I'm too tall. All right, so the board's there. So Eckermark asked how versatile the sprint is. And he's looking to get between the All-Star and the sprint. So basically, what I'd recommend, depending on what you're doing, would be if you're paddling mainly in flat water, you're paddling on lakes and rivers where there's not a lot of turbulent water, I would recommend the sprint just because it's a very versatile board. It can handle I think for me, anything up to like 12 to 15 knots sometimes. And what I find is the only time that I probably would use the All-Star over the Sprint or the Ace over the Sprint is in pure downwind racing, or when I'm going in and out through the surf, or when the wind gets over 15 or so knots. So it's sort of like a go-to board for me, pretty much in everything. And maybe also the Sprint's sort of like pool racing stuff, but that's not really my forte, so I don't worry about that too much. What I find with the Sprint is it's just a very efficient board. Like if you want to maintain pace, maintain glide, and I don't know, sit on a better average speed, you're going to be able to do that a lot easier on the Sprint. So that's something that I'd really think about. Chris Couve, hello mate, I'll see you next week. What races am I going to use this board for this year and why? This year I'll be doing like Carolina, Europe, APP, and a few other races that are standalones. With the Sprint, I'll be using it for basically all of those. I think only maybe Vendy Gliss, if it's a downwind, or may not be. I'll probably use that for that. Otherwise, I might. Sorry, I'm just trying to fix up trying to make it less dark, and now all I can see is myself. With the there's not really many races. I think maybe I might try All-Stars for the Sprints this year in the APP, and obviously for Molokai I'll be using a downwind board. For the Maui APP I'll probably be using a downwind board, and yeah, that's basically what I'll be using those boards for. Pascal Schmidt asked, he's currently paddling a 12.6 by 28 All-Star and he wants to get a 14. He said the Swiss Lake's a bit choppy, but he's not sure what he should get. I think the Sprint is probably the go. I think you probably should go for about probably, I don't know your level of paddling, but let's go a 14 by 24. If you're very much a beginner, probably go the waterline or something like that, as you sort of recommended. I wouldn't really use a Sprint unless you've done a fair bit of paddling, like you're sort of more intermediate to advanced paddler. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend sort of the pro racing boards unless you've done a little bit of paddling. But in saying that, some people pick it up fast and you don't want to buy 3 or 4 different boards. So best thing is to go see your local distributor, your local shop who's got the Starboards in range, and try and go for a demo. Or just find a friend who's got one. What else have we got? Hendrik Carstens, g'day mate. When I developed the boards, I think I answered this a bit earlier. So what he's asking is if we the boards or if we design basically all the boards separately. Basically what we do is we get the best 14 by 20.75 this time, the narrowest board, the fastest board, and then we work our way from there. Basically we do try and scale it up from the initial phase, but then we'll actually test that board as much as we test the fast boards to see how they work, because you don't, just because you're scalable doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work. So you got to work it for the different sizes of athletes, the different so that's something we work on really, really hard. Fredericks also asked, he wants to know why the Sprint has kept the concave and why the All-Stars kept the belly. So we've tested both. So when we tested on the Sprint, it didn't tend to work as well, and we're not really sure why, whether it's the straighter rails, whether it's because it's got a bit more, what do you call it, chamfers channels on the side, but it didn't actually increase more speed. So what we did, we just kept the concave, because it seemed to be working, allowed us to go narrower, and it actually gave us more width on the board. Whereas the All-Star, we found it had a significant improvement once we got to putting the belly on it. So the All-Star is going a lot faster now, whereas the Sprint sort of took off for a while, and then it was like a lot further ahead of the All-Star, whereas the All-Star is starting to catch up again, which is really cool to see. Let's see if I got any more comments. There's one in a different language. I can't read that, sorry. Sarawut. That's probably so wrong, sorry about that. On Instagram, we've got J Lane Finn 555 asked, I get away with a really small fin usually. So basically asking about fins. So standard sort of stuff. If your board is unstable, put a bigger fin in. If your board is really stable, you can put a smaller fin in. Smaller fin equals less drag, bigger fin equals more drag. But also you've got to look at your shape of your fin. So depending on what type of fin you have, you can go like a shorter fin with a bit more of like a surfing angle, which will be better for surfing, downwind, and turning around cans. Otherwise, you can go like sort of a fin that's got a bit more depth in it, and that sort of type of fin will give you better tracking when you're paddling along. So you'll be able to go in a straight line for longer without going side to side, because if you imagine when you're paddling, you're not actually always going straight, you're actually going sideways for a bit when you're paddling on your right-hand side, then you're going this side when you're paddling on your left-hand side. So what a fatter fin sort of does is limits that sort of tracking. In what conditions does the sprint perform the worst? I think it doesn't really perform the worst in anything. It really depends on your perspective and what you're comparing it to. But for me, as I said before, I use it mainly for technical courses, lakes, rivers, sometimes in the ocean. Just depends on the swell and the wind size, and depends on the type of race. That you can't think that all races are the same. So I basically would paddle, if I was just training, I'd probably paddle my sprint all the time. But if it's a pure downwind, I would definitely choose an ace or an all-star. And at the same time, you probably wouldn't use a sprint in and out through the surf unless it's really small, because you do get the speed advantage, but as soon as the sort of the dugout fills up, it makes you that little bit slower because you've got water in there and it can only empty so fast. So, and you want to be able to get that speed up through the break. So a sprint isn't something you'd use in heavy water. Someone else asked, what is my average speed when training on open and ocean waters? It's pretty hard to say because it really depends on conditions. So if it's a dead flat, maybe we can average up towards 12 if we're going for, say, like 1 kilometre. But if it's generally in a race, we're probably averaging around 10 kilometres an hour. The guys averaging about 10.5 to 11 are probably winning races now. In the flat waters, just be purely on racing strategy and stuff. If it's a time trial, maybe we can go faster, but I don't necessarily do time trials like that, so I don't really know. Downwinding, we can do sort of on the 14s on a really good day. 15 k's an hour would be really good. On unlimited, it'd be 17 k's, 18 k's an hour. And yeah, so it really depends. Like on light wind conditions, you might average 13.5. It just depends. Liverpool Supco asked, what type of training do I do to prepare for races? I think training is really hard to sort of nut out really quickly, but basically it's a 3-month sort of lead into to the start of the season for me. It's a lot of aerobic sort of base conditioning, doing different sports. At the moment I'm doing some swimming, I did some Ironman. I did a whole bunch of different activities just to keep myself fit, and then I'll actually start training properly next month on the board, so full on. But make sure that if you've got that general aerobic fitness, if you're training for a race, you should be training in those conditions. So if you're training for a downwind, train lots of downwind, but expect flat. So actually prepare for the worst and then expect the best. So you can sort of really be ready for anything. Train for a technical race, train for technical racing, do lots of high aerobic work, or do some anaerobic sprints, do a lot of turning. If you want to be a sprinter, you just do sprint work and you do less cardio, less endurance, and more sprinting. But yeah, so it's all about specific sort of type of racing. You can't really pick anything. You can't really pick a training plan unless you know the exact event. So yeah, that's a vague way to look at it. But yeah, if you've got any more questions, feel free to text me on my own social media or on Starboard, and they'll get it to me. What's next? What's that? Tristan's asked, do you have any tips for battling long distance side chop on the sprint? I think it's important to really do a lot of like leg conditioning and leg strength. Especially if you want to go on a narrow board, you want to be on those faster sort of equipment that people are using these days. You have to build your leg conditioning. So whether that's doing a salt bike, it's doing running, even swimming, I think helps, like a bit of kicking and all that type of leg conditioning will really help you with that side chop. because if once your legs go, I always say that your paddling goes. Like, you can have the best upper body in the world, but as soon as you get tired, you're not going to be able to do that well. So yeah, just thinking about your leg conditioning, and as soon as you feel unstable, try and get down. So like, if you're high and you're standing really high, think about your center of balance. Your balance point's going to be up here. You bring your balance point down here, it's going to be easy to paddle. It might feel a little bit goofy at the time, but it's going to help you a lot. It's going to get through that section that's a little bit choppy. I think that's a perfect example is that San Sebastian race I did a few years. When we were coming around the corner into the river, basically it was all side chop, and that's where the sprint does sort of become a little bit unstable, purely because of those big side rails. It's not really made to sort of surf through that sort of section. Like, so something like an all-side would lift up above that section, same as like an ace. It's got that sort of roll, will allow you to sort of move, whereas like the sprint with the harder sides will actually move more like this, which will obviously make it a little bit more unstable. But for me personally, I find that I'm able to counteract that really, really easily, just by knowing my board. Because every time that I paddle something else other than the sprint, I probably don't do as well as I could. So I always find that knowing your board is more important than having a board for every single conditions. Like, it's just not possible for us to be able to travel and do, I don't know, take 3 boards everywhere. So I have to work out at the start of the season where I want to send my boards, and the sprint is the one I send the most. I have sent an all-star over to Europe this year, so that'll be my sort of backup board from the sprint, and I'll be sending an ace to Maui. So is there any more questions on anybody who's watching? Otherwise, I'm going to start to wrap this up. Is there anything on the board, anything about what I do? I don't think I've missed any comments that have come through. I'm not an expert on the paddles, so I can't really bring you into that at the moment. Mileto. All right, well, yeah, that's it then for me. The sprint is by far my favorite board. If you have any questions, please put them through on the social media. All right, we've got another question. Thanks, Chris. His ability to ride. So one of my favorite features of the previous sprint was the ability to ride side and tailways really well, but it catches the nose sometimes. Would you say that the new, more rounded nose in the sprint makes that 2020 wash riding easier? Yes, I think I went through that at the start a little bit. The rounded nose does allow you to sort of move through the chop and sitting on wash a little bit easier and catching those bumps. So that was sort of like the flatter section, obviously from the nose to sort of the standing area as well. It allows you to sort of trim the board a lot easier, and you'll be able to get into those bumps a lot easier. Tristan Gregg, am I going to be the next James Bond? Look, you never say never, who knows? And Andrew, thanks. I am swimming to Rottnest on the weekend in a team of 4. If you would, we're doing it for a charity called Ocean Heroes. So if you would like to donate, check out Michael Booth on my Facebook or my Instagram. There's actually links in those bio pages. Ocean Heroes is it takes autistic children surfing. I've been sort of a part of it for about 3 years now, and as a sort of a very distant ambassador role, but it's always nice to raise money for a local charity who does great things for the community, and we're hoping to raise a bit of money for those guys. So if you want to donate, check it out. So I think that's going to be it for me. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions, please pass them on. See you next time, and hopefully we'll have another chat. Cheers.